Hi everyone. Once again, my name is Linda Abraham and I'm the president of Accepted and the moderator for today's webinar. Welcome to the new MCAT, What's Hype, What's Real, and What You Can Do Today, to be presented by Dr. Anthony LaFond of Next Step Test Prep. Probably the most anxiety-provoking part of the medical school application process is the MCAT, especially with all the new changes about to be introduced. That's why we've invited an expert in MCAT prep to speak here today. We're going to discuss how to approach the new sections of the MCAT, as well as additional planning, time management, and study resources. Anthony is going to provide an awesome overview, as well as concrete options and steps that you can take that will improve your score on the MCAT. Before we start, a few housekeeping items. Anthony may ask questions during the presentation and ask you to raise your hand in response. You can do so by clicking on the hand icon, two icons underneath the horizontal orange arrow on your control panel. Please raise your hand when you find it. So let's see. How many of you found it? Come on. Yay. Couple. Let's get some more. All right. All right. You guys got it. Okay, good. As usual, we're looking forward to answering your questions, and we've set aside time for Q&A at the end. So feel free to enter your questions in the question window, and we'll review the questions submitted and choose those that have the broadest application. If we don't have time to get to your specific question, we'll be providing several options for you where you can get answers at the end of the webinar. Now, just a bit about our presenter and his company, Next Step Test Prep. Dr. Anthony LaFond is Next Step's National Content Director and their most highly qualified and highly rated MCAT tutor, as you can see on the screen right now. He completed his MD PhD at UMDNJ. He has over a decade of teaching and tutoring experience and a proven track record of success helping students succeed on the MCAT. He began his MCAT career over a decade ago at one of the big national companies. Now, when he's not tutoring students in the MCAT or developing content for MCAT prep, he happens to love Tough Mudder competitions and has completed 6 of them since 2011. Next Step Test Prep provides expert one-on-one tutoring for the major graduate and professional school entrance exams. Accepted is delighted to be hosting this webinar for Next Step. Anthony, the floor, or should I say the mic and screen, are all yours. I'll tell you what, we're going to start with that first poll, right?
All right. Yes, thank you, Linda. So welcome, everybody. Hope you're enjoying a lovely Tuesday evening here in November. So as you can see right now, there should be a poll open up on screen. So before we get started, I want to thank Linda and the team at Accepted for that excellent introduction. And I want you guys to take a look at this poll. Go ahead, let us know, give us a response. So have you ever taken the MCAT before? So do you have any MCAT experience at all, whether it's the old MCAT or maybe you just heard about it, you've read about it, you know you need to take it for med school, and that's it. Let us know your level of familiarity with the MCAT itself.
Okay, wow, we have a really fantastic audience here. We already have 96% have voted. That's fantastic. Okay, I'm going to close the poll now, and now I'm going to share it again, and you can see the results. Let's see, get it out of the way. 35%. Okay. Can you see it, Anthony, or do you want me to read it?
Yeah, well said. Yep.
Okay.
So it looks like about a little over a third of you guys, a few of you have taken the MCAT once, so you've gotten a taste, all right. A few of you have taken it more than once, and about almost 40% of you have not taken the MCAT at all. So no previous experience taking the MCAT. Okay. All right. So we'll talk more about that later, if that's all right. The MCAT's changing. It's one of the things we're talking about. So if you do not have any specific experience with the MCAT, it's not going to hurt you too much in the long run because it is undergoing changes. If you have seen the MCAT before, the good news is it's not changing all that much. So the work you put in, the prep you put in, some of it, a lot of it will translate into the new MCAT. Okay? So let's get started with our presentation. So we'll put this poll away. We'll bring up some more in a few minutes. We want your feedback as we go through this session, make it as lively as possible. So we're going to go ahead and go back to the slides. And if you can see now, we should have these slides right back up. So you can see there's my presentation. Okay, let's move forward then. So the MCAT, we're going to talk tonight about the MCAT in admissions, why it's there, why med schools seem to love this crazy exam, and we'll talk about what's changing and what's not. And more importantly, what do you need to do now? It's November 2014. What should you be doing as of today and in the near future, 6 months, 3 months down the line to get ready for the MCAT? So first we're going to talk about why the MCAT exists and why it's undergoing such big changes. So the MCAT is required for all American medical schools. MD, DO, doesn't matter, you've got to take the MCAT. And so there are different schools of thought in terms of how important the MCAT is. Some schools, it's a major, major admissions requirement. 50% of your, admissions criteria will be devoted to the MCAT. Some schools, it's a little bit lower. They all require it, but the weight they give it is always among the largest. Pretty much the biggest cuts med schools make are largely numerical. There's no way around that. They get thousands and thousands of well-deserving students applying. The only way to really whittle people down without having to wade through all those personal statements is numerical, MCAT GPA. So that is the single best way you can make yourself stand out from your peers when it comes to admissions. Having those clear and present numbers that show you, look, I stand above my peers. I am more prepared for med school than them. Okay? So it's a lot different than what you're used to with the SAT, because for the most part, people who get an average MCAT score don't really apply to medical school. Okay? Now the MCAT also says why schools want it. For one, it's a standardized, predictable exam. That's good news. The fact that it's so predictable, so standardized, allows schools to compare applicants from New Jersey to California to Texas to Alaska, regardless of major. Whether you're a traditional pre-med bio major, you're a non-traditional art history major, they want a nice objective way to compare all applicants and how ready they are for medical school. Another reason they use this exam, and why it's not just simply, hey, let's look at your science grades, is that this test itself tests very specific skills that you're going to be needing as a medical student. So not just first year success, but second year, third year, fourth year. And what I like to do is I tell my students, I can actually take you through all the skills that the MCAT claims to test and tell you how that directly translates to each of your 4 years of medical school and how you build on each. What you do not want to assume is that the MCAT is not an intelligence test, and it is not going to test how good a doctor you're going to be. Med schools believe that, yes, they use it to predict your success as a medical student. No more, no less. Right. So how do they actually get this number or decide what makes you competitive or not? So you get 2 scores on the new MCAT, just like you did on the old MCAT. You get a raw score, which literally tells you how many questions you got right. Okay? Now we want you guys to let us know, when do you plan on taking the MCAT when it comes to score? So go ahead, poll in, let us know when you plan on taking the MCAT. Because this will give us an idea of what score you should be shooting for, how much time you have, what are you looking to do. Great, keep those answers coming. All right, almost at 90%, so let us know when you plan on taking it.
Okay, we're almost at 90. Anybody else want to vote? All right, 1. I'm going to close the poll in a second at the count of 5, 2, 3, 4, 5. And there are the results. You want to announce
Excellent.
them?
Thank you, Linda. So take a look, guys, at the screen. So this is what your peers are reporting. So about 14% of you are saying you're planning to take the MCATs early in April when it first rolls out. 10% are maybe taking it the next month, and traditionally more people are taking the MCAT later on in the summer, maybe when classes in your semester is over. Okay? A few of you, about a fifth, maybe plan on taking it in 2016. So that means we've got some freshmen, some sophomores here tonight, or maybe people not looking to go to med school for another 2 years. All right, so I want to congratulate you on your forward thinking. If you're already thinking about that now, excellent. Way to be ahead of the curve. And about 70% of you just aren't sure yet. Maybe you'll let that, tonight's presentation help you decide when should you take the MCAT. But no matter when you plan on taking it, you will be getting a raw score and a scaled score.
Anthony, you
let's
cut
go
out.
back to the class slides, and let's take a look at what these scores mean. How about now? Should be good?
Yep. Now we hear
Okay.
you. You cut out for a second.
All right. Sorry about that. Okay. So we've got a raw score, which literally tells them how many questions you get right. But the more important score you guys should focus on is the scaled score. So the old MCAT was scored from 1 to 15 in 3 sections. So really your score could range across 15 points. And every time you increased your score, you were moving past thousands of applicants in terms of where you ranked, your percentile ranked. How many people scored not as well as you did? Well, the MCAT's still the same. Look at that scaled score. It goes from 118 to 132. So it's still essentially, a 15-point scale. So they haven't really changed much. They've just given new numbers. So instead of expecting a 30 and up, Now we're going to be shooting for a 510. If you want to be competitive, the maximum score is a 528, but you want to be shooting for around a 510. That's what we expect the AAMC's data to show. That if you can score a 510, that's like scoring a 30 or a 31, putting you in the top 10%. That's what you should be shooting for when it comes to applications and admissions, shooting the top 10%. Now, what is changing about this new MCAT besides just the numbers that represent your score? There's also some major content changes. And we're going to talk about the skills, what's not changing about the MCAT. Okay? So the new MCAT is much, much, much longer. All right, so back in my day when I took the MCAT, before it went on computer, it was around this long, about 6-7 hours long. It was a whole day. Now the reason they're doing this is it gives them a better idea of your skills, but also they want to prepare you guys for the rigors of medical school. So my licensing exams, I've taken 3 of them already, were all between 7 and 8 hours long, 350 multiple choice questions across 8 hours. So they want to get you used to that level of academic rigor, that level of critical thinking for hours and hours at a time. So the new MCAT reflects that. You've got 4 90-plus minute sections testing chemistry, physics, orgo, bio, biochem, and the new sections of psychology and sociology that has never been on the MCAT before. So really that's the only new section is this psychology and sociology. Even the critical analysis is a revamped and just enlarged verbal section. So there's new content, sure, and it's longer. So stamina, endurance, efficiency, going to be an even bigger part of test A than it was previously. All right. So let's take a look at the hard social sciences, the scientific part. Now remind yourself that, well, if all the MCAT cared about, or all med schools really cared about, was your science ability, they would look at your grades. And everybody in med school would be a bio major or a biochem major. Now speaking as an engineering major, you know, when I got to first year, I shared a cadaver with an art history major, a bio major, a chem major, and me, the engineer. So there's a reason we can get into med school along with you traditional pre-meds. The MCAT's not about just testing your science skills. It's about testing your critical thinking and reasoning skills. And they just happen to do that with a little bit of science thrown on top. But it's also testing your ability to manage time, be organized, limit anxiety, solve problems in a limited amount of time, recognize material that you know, but recognize it in an unfamiliar context. So if you notice, the science on the MCAT isn't that bad. We're only talking maybe first year Gen Chem, first year physics, first year bio, a semester's worth of orgo, a semester's worth of biochem, maybe a semester's worth of psych and soc. Not much actual science compared to how complex those subjects get later on. So it's really a lot like the old MCAT. They don't test much in terms of science compared to what you've learned in undergrad or what you will learn. The true difficulty of the MCAT is still going to lie in how it tests those science topics, the critical reading, critical thinking aspect. And that means, okay, well, it's a very predictable exam. There's only so many ways they can do that, so it's a very trainable exam, a very beatable exam, even though it's longer. So the sciences, you're going to have 95 minutes to do 59 questions across 10 passages. There's also going to be discretes. So of those 59 questions, 15 will be standalone, and the other 44 will be spread out across 10 passages. So it's similar to the old MCAT. Read a passage, answer some questions. Read a passage, answer some questions. And occasionally answer just a pure recall standalone question. So you still need that good science foundation. But at its heart, it is still a critical thinking, a critical reading exam. Now here is a practice you guys can take a look at. So here's something new from the psychology section. So we've got a sample question. Still got the same 4 answers. And it tells us a psychologist conducts an experiment in which a dog is trained to roll over. The dog has a small device strapped to its back. Rolling over, it presses a button on the device. If the dog rolls over in time, the button is pressed and the device does not shock the dog. This form of conditioning would best be described as using one of these answers. Now we do not want to rush to answers. Remember, the MCAT's testing critical reading, critical thinking. So let's analyze what situation we've got here. We need to first, number one, they're testing our knowledge of conditioning, operant conditioning. And we have this dog. This dog is presented with the removal of a negative stimulus. Okay? So if he rolls over in time, he will not get shocked. So he's looking to avoid some kind of negative stimulus, this negative shock. Okay? If he doesn't, he's going to get negative reinforcement. Okay? So oftentimes, when you read psychology, reinforcement is used to encourage or increase a behavior. Here, our research is trying to reinforce the behavior of rolling over. Now, we can say that it's negative reinforcement because the rolling over, which is the behavior they're trying to get the dog to do, the behavior they're trying to reinforce, is only achieved through the removal of a negative stimulus. The dog is trying to avoid the shock by learning to roll over. Thus, the correct answer here would be C, negative reinforcement through avoidance. And this is a common conditioning setup that students often get wrong. In fact, if you're a fan of the Big Bang Theory, a few weeks ago they had an episode where Sheldon corrects one of his roommates about the difference between positive and negative reinforcement. People often confuse the two. So here, since we're removing a negative stimulus, we're doing negative reinforcement through avoidance. So if you were shaky on any of that, if you weren't sure, you haven't had psychology, that will reiterate or underscore the importance of having a solid science background. You could be the greatest critical thinker in the world or the greatest critical reader in the world. If you're not sure of some of the terminology of psychology, we would know whether this is positive or negative reinforcement. We would know to call it avoidance. So this requires multiple skill set, analyzing the experiment, identifying the key parts, tying it into the fundamental rules of operant conditioning in psychology. Let's try a traditional hard science question. Okay. I know it may not be your favorite, that's okay, and the good news is there's a lot less organic chemistry on the new MCAT than there used to be. A lot less. Doesn't mean it's not still difficult. So we have a question here that wants to know, which of these compounds can form hydrogen bonds? So you're thinking back to undergrad. Oh, what did I learn with hydrogen bonding? What did I learn with the rules for hydrogen bonding? And maybe you're remembering that, okay, one of the mnemonics you may have picked up, one of the mnemonics I like to tell my students, is you can remember hold the phone for hydrogen bonding. Whenever you have a hydrogen bonded to very electronegative elements like fluorine, oxygen, nitrogen, thus hold the phone, HFON, you're going to get a very uneven sharing of electrons on those hydrogen, which results in the hydrogens being slightly positively charged. Thus, they can now contribute to hydrogen bonding, form temporary attractions to other negatively charged atoms because they themselves will be positively charged. So do we see any hold the phone satisfactory molecules here? Well, Roman numeral 1. We see a carboxylic acid, which involves bonding oxygen to hydrogen. That satisfies hold the phone. Oxygen's fairly electronegative. We can say Roman numeral 1 will definitely form hydrogen bonds. Now at this point, we can use some critical thinking, critical reading, to save ourselves some time. If we know Roman numeral 1 is true, we can go to the answers and say, well, that means answer choice B must be incorrect. Answer choice C must be incorrect. We're only left with two choices now. We have a 50-50 shot. We don't even need to look at Roman numeral 3. At this point, it doesn't even matter what it says. We just need to check Roman numeral 2. We see an amine, a carbon, an R group, single bonded to a nitrogen. And that nitrogen is bonded to two hydrogens. Well, nitrogen, hydrogen, that still satisfies hold the phone, so this amine will also be able to contribute to hydrogen bonding. Okay? Therefore, the answer we can go with is D. The carboxylic acid and the amine can contribute to hydrogen bonding, while the methane group, which we never need to look at, cannot. So that's a little bit of the strategy you'll learn when you study for the MCAT, and if you choose to study with Next Step as well. Being able to reach behind the brute, just brute force memorization, being able to reach behind the question and remember what the MCAT is. It's a standardized multiple choice exam that simply tests critical reading with science on it. So the minute you have enough information to solve your answer, move on. They're not going to hand out bonus points for doing extra work, so we're not going to bother. Now, critical analysis section, critical analysis and reasoning section, sounds very upstanding, very, very fancy. But essentially, it's like a supercharged verbal reasoning section. It's a lot like the current verbal MCAT. It's just a lot longer. You have 9 passages covering humanities, social science, natural sciences. Also, spread out across 53 questions. So the section itself is getting about 25% longer. You have about 53 questions instead of the current 40. So it's still similar. You've got to answer the questions based on what you read in a passage, but it's a lot longer, which means this new section is going to be more difficult because instead of only having to do it for an hour, you've got to do it for about 90 minutes across 25% almost more questions across 9 different passages. So this will make it much, much harder. And there's a reason the AAMC does not call this reading comprehension. They want to separate themselves from the ACT and the SAT. They want to let you know, wait a minute, you guys have gone through high school, you've gone through college, and you're considering med school. We are not just going to simply test your comprehension skills. We want to test your thinking skills. So a lot of these questions will ask you to read in between the lines, do some thinking within the passage, do some extrapolation beyond the passage, and they'll have very, very tempting answers to distract you or tie you up or cause you to lose points. Okay? So there's still only one right answer, but 3 of them will always be very cleverly worded for us to get them wrong. Okay? Now, unlike the sciences, in cars, there is no outside knowledge needed. You do not want to bring any outside knowledge to the cars section. All of your answers, like before, must be answered or must be justified by what you read in the passage. Okay? Now let's talk about what you guys should be doing today. So we're going to bring up another poll for you. So right now, Linda and I would like to know, are you guys still in school at all? Go ahead, let us know. If you're in school, where are you? If you're done and you've graduated, congratulations, let us know that too. Because there's plenty of people who go to medical school. We had several students who had already had careers in my first year class who had been pharmacists, lawyers, mothers. They had had previous careers. So there's no reason you can't go to med school.
That's right. We've also worked with people from all different business backgrounds, architects, all kinds of things. Okay, we have about 90% having voted. I'm going to count to 5 and close the poll if anybody else wants to vote. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And here I'm sharing the results. We have 94% voting. That's a wonderful audience, Anthony. And you can...
Yes, I agree, Linda. Thank you guys. You guys are doing great. Lots of engagement, lots of enthusiasm. I like it. So you've got about a quarter, 24% are saying, yep, I'm a freshman or a sophomore. So congratulations. You guys are well ahead of the game. I didn't decide I was going to med school until somewhere around my junior year. So if you already know, as a freshman or a sophomore, you've got this new MCAT coming up, and you're going to have to crush it in order to get into med school. You want to do your best. Excellent for thinking ahead. If you're already a junior or a senior, you are not behind. But again, you're on a more strict schedule, okay? And the MCAT's now changing. Maybe you didn't know that a year ago. Maybe you didn't know that when you started undergrad that the MCAT was changing. Maybe you weren't plugged in. That's perfectly normal, right? You weren't supposed to be an MCAT expert back then. But now it's more incumbent upon you, the closer you are to your expected admissions deadlines, to start earnestly making up what you're going to be doing to prepare for this new MCAT. And we've got 6 of you who are already done with your bachelor's, all right? So you're doing some other work, doing maybe an industry, maybe doing something else. Excellent. 15% of you are pursuing a master's degree, maybe a PhD. Very nice. So I've been there. I know how that feels. And 24% of you are not in school at all. Okay? So maybe you're working, maybe you're semi-retired, maybe you're independently. That's great. So no matter where you are, let's talk about what you should be doing today. As of November 18th, what do you want to be doing to get ready for your MCAT whenever you choose to take it, depending on how you responded in previous polls. All right, so let's go back. And let's see. Step 1. The AAMC has already released one official practice MCAT, just one. They are being very, very, very cautious. They are playing it very close to the vest with this new MCAT because they, like you guys, aren't sure what to expect yet, okay? Which makes it all the more reason to take what you can get. Good news is, Next Step has already taken this practice test. So the day after that practice test was released, I had spent 8 hours taking it, and then I spent the next 2 days reviewing it, analyzing it, seeing what the AAMC chooses to test, seeing and looking into what have they chosen to showcase on their very first presentation to the world of the new MCAT. So if you'd like, you can visit our website. We'll put the URL up at the end of this presentation. We've set up some great videos, along with my colleague Brian, another MCAT expert, that we can walk you through each section and take you through solving several passages from each section. That way you can get an idea of what kind of thinking, what kind of analysis, what kind of skills are needed for the new MCAT. Step 2, we are also providing a free MCAT content transition guide. So a great guide, again, you can visit our website, let us know about how to get ready for this new MCAT. What does it mean about your studies? What does it mean about what resources you should grab? What MCAT materials will still be relevant with this new MCAT? We also offer a great way to stay on top of your content is with question of the day. So you can log in via your phones, you can log in on your computer, but we pose a new question each day that is supposed to highlight the thinking, reasoning, and reading skills and science skills that the MCAT's looking to test. That way you can always stay up to date. Let the MCAT always be on your mind. You may not be actively studying every day, but you want to realize that the MCAT's there, it's coming, and you're going to use every opportunity you can to ace it, do really well on it. Now, all the best plans in the world mean nothing if you don't actually register for the test and put your money where your mouth is, meaning literally we've got to pay the MCAT to register for the exam, and then you've got to make a plan to study for that test. Especially since it's a new, longer exam, you have to plan out carefully. How are you going to be preparing class-wise to get ready for the MCAT? How are you going to be preparing in earnest for the exam itself? There will be several stages, getting ready for the exam and then earnestly prepping for the exam. Now, if you do apply early, so for example, if you're a sophomore or junior or really freshman or sophomore, you're well ahead of the game. And if you're taking the MCAT, a year and a half, 2 years in advance, all right, that's great. Applying early, though, no matter what, even if you're a junior or a senior, so if you're taking the MCAT this summer, you're looking to start med school in fall 2016. There is never any penalty for applying early. Med schools are pretty much almost all on rolling admissions, which means if you're applying in August, you are competing for, if you went to my school, Rutgers, there were about 170 students in my class. It's still about 170. So if you're applying in August and your application is complete, you're competing for 170 spots. But when I got in early October. There was an accepted students luncheon in January of the year I started medical school. There were about 150 students at that luncheon, meaning the class in January, the year the school was supposed to start, already in January, the class is about 90% full. Okay? So the sooner you apply, the sooner your application is complete, and without an MCAT score, schools will not consider your application complete. Doesn't matter if they love the way your personal statement looked, or they love your GPA, or they love you, they cannot consider you complete or really seriously entertain you as an applicant until they have a complete application. So you want to get that done early. So hopefully if you can, take the MCAT sometime in late spring, early summer. Right? You want to have your application complete by August, maybe late August. When you start to get to September, October, you're already on the late side of having your application complete. It just makes your job that much harder. Now, what skills do you need for the MCAT? Well, we've seen critical reading. Sure, of course, that's number one. Critical reading, critical thinking. But don't forget, there's a lot of other skills that go into succeeding on the MCAT, and there'll be a lot of other skills that go into succeeding in med school. You need a solid science background. So we can't just expect that, all right, I'm a great critical thinker, I'm a great critical reader, I'm a smart guy, I'm ready to take the MCAT. No, no matter how smart you are, or no matter how good a reader you are, without that requisite science content, without that solid foundation of the core content, you cannot do well on the MCAT. It's just not possible. And without organization skills, time management skills, you will not be able to prepare effectively for the MCAT, and you will not be able to get as many points as you can in the time they give you, 95 minutes in the sciences, 90 minutes in verbal, or in the CAR section. You won't have that unless you can work effectively and efficiently. The same goes for your study time. If you cannot study efficiently, you're not going to have enough time to prepare. You won't be ready in time to maximize your ability to get into med school. So that's, again, these are all the skills you get if you choose to enroll in Next Step Tutoring. But no matter what, how you choose to prepare, you want to make sure you're building these skills. And something that's often overlooked is pressure. Channeling anxiety, managing anxiety, because it's going to happen. You're going to have anxiety when you're studying for the MCAT, And I hate to burst your bubble, but even after you get into med school and you're very, very happy, it's a great day when you get that acceptance call, I still remember it to this day, the pressure doesn't go away. That's what it means to be a physician. That's what it means to commit your life to medicine. You have to be able to work under pressure. You have to be able to solve very important problems under some pretty stressful situations. Now, you do not need to be able to handle that now, but being able to manage anxiety, tolerate pressure, knowing that you have to do well on this exam in the time you have, and only in the time you have, is a crucial skill. Because there's good anxiety, the anxiety that gets you up in the morning, lets you realize, hey, I've got to get up and study. My friends are going to party, but you know what? No, I have to study for the MCAT because I want to be a physician. I want that white coat, so I need to go study today. But there's bad anxiety. The anxiety that gets you so overwhelmed you literally can't get out of bed. Oh, it's too hard. It's too far away. The MCAT's just impossible. Why don't I just not bother? No. So we want to manage that pressure, manage that anxiety, and channel it usefully because there is good anxiety. Okay? So if you're asking at this point, Anthony, this is all great information, but what do I need? All right? What material should you use? Well, that depends on, all right, well, what part of the new MCAT most concerns you? Which part of the MCAT do you already feel strong about? Okay, maybe you're not worried about the materials there, but let us know in this poll, which part of the new MCAT makes you the most nervous? That's what you want to focus on in terms of materials, where you think you need the most help. So go ahead, poll in, let us know what you're thinking.
And we're getting great response from the audience. We have already 70% responding. Let's see if we can't get a few more people voting. 86%. I'm going to count to 5 and close it. And now we have 92%. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Thank you, everybody. And here are the results.
All right, take a look at that, everybody. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you, Linda, again. You guys have been doing great. So I know these polls are keeping you engaged. We want feedback. We don't just want to sit here and talk at you guys about the MCAT. We want to know what your feelings about the MCAT are. And it looks like 6% of you, very few of you, are worried about the biological foundations. Not a big surprise. Most traditional pre-meds, which I'm sure most of you are, this should be your bread and butter. This should be your golden ticket. You're strongest with the biological sciences. You're most comfortable with the biological sciences. So you're least likely to be concerned. So fine. You already have a solid idea. So all you need to do is great. Find a book that keeps it limited to the MCAT, and you'll be all set. However, 35% of you are reporting that you're worried more or most about the chem physics section. Because again, typical pre-meds, you're not as familiar with this material. So your comfort level isn't nearly as high. All right, 35% of you are worried about cars. Okay, well, there's good news and bad news with that. And if you become one of our tutoring students, we'll take you through that. But essentially, the good news is there's no outside knowledge for verbal. However, that means for cars, we literally have to train our brains to think like the MCAT. That's what you're doing in cars. So it can be frustrating because there's no chapter you can point to and say, well, I'll just study that chapter, learn that formula, and I should get better at cars. That doesn't exist. So it's all about having someone there to guide you, having a clear goal of what strategies work best for this section, what methods, what kind of thinking does the MCAT reward. Okay? And about 24% of you, a little bit less than a quarter, are worried about the psychological foundations, so psych-soc, the most. Okay? All right, yeah, these are the softer sciences, so maybe you've had a semester of these, maybe you haven't. Okay? Now, they're not as conceptual. They don't tend to be as complex as traditional hard sciences. But on the flip side, that means they're not as predictable. They're not as systematic as traditional hard sciences. So they also come with their own set of difficulties. Okay? So no matter what your difficulty levels are, whether it's biochem, verbal, or psych-soc, you need to get with materials that are going to keep the strategies and content limited to what you need for the MCAT. There is no sense studying, hours and hours of biochem that is never going to show up on the MCAT. It literally becomes a waste of time. There is no sense studying, alkene reactions in depth if you know they're never going to show up on the MCAT and you'll never be rewarded for it. Because we're not studying to satisfy our ego. We're not studying to broaden our scientific knowledge base. We're studying now with a goal towards acing the MCAT, which means we need to get much more efficient. And again, that's the advantage of working with an MCAT-oriented tutor or an MCAT-oriented program and MCAT-oriented materials, like the AAMC materials. They keep it limited to what is it you are responsible for? What is it you need to know? So number one, start with getting everything the AAMC releases. And no, it's not free, okay? But they have released right now a new guide, so it's about $30. You can pick it up on Amazon, and that contains a sample exam. It's about a half-length exam, so you can go through that. They've also released their annual MSAR, so Med School Admissions Report. It's always a great resource, okay? They've also now released a practice test. So the new practice test, there's only one for the new MCAT, but grab those because there is no substitute for the real thing. So, I'm Next Step's content director, so I've spent the last year or so developing the new, MCAT materials we're going to be rolling out, and they're all based on the AAMC's materials and their guidelines and their practice tests. So I've been working with these exams and this material for over a year now, since when they announced the change. But there still is no substitute for the real thing, right? We're here to supplement your prep, but definitely, number one, get all the official stuff, okay? Then what you can do is pair that traditional AAMC release material, but their job is not to educate you. They don't care about educating you, improving you. They just want to show you, here's what's on the exam, go get ready. So if you pair those practice tests with our AAMC review videos on Next Step, and we've uploaded them on YouTube as well, you're going to be able to see through how do you combine the AAMC's content, the AAMC's skill testing. How do you combine that with proven strategies that are going to work to raise your score? That's what the advantage is. Because now, from now on, we're not just studying random material. We're studying it with an eye towards acing the MCAT. You can also use Khan Academy. So Khan Academy wasn't really that big when I was applying to med school. Didn't really exist. It was really small, mostly focused on K through 12 education. But now Khan Academy is huge. I've been recommending it to my students for years. I even used it when I got to med school in first year. It's a great way to bone up on some very fundamental science. So now the AAMC has officially partnered with Khan Academy, and they've made several videos that walk you through content. Again, just to get students familiar with the content the AAMC says you are responsible for on the MCAT. And again, they list it. If you buy that official guide, they literally tell you, here are all the content areas in physics, gen chem, bio, orgo, physics, sociology, psychology. Here are all the topics we're allowed to test you on. Okay? Now, after you've got all that material, what you need now is strategy. You need thinking skills. You need proven strategies that are going to allow you to move through that test efficiently and effectively. That's where Next Step comes in. That's where practice books come in. Because it's not just enough to have the content. It's not just enough to have the science. You can learn the science in whatever way works best for you. For example, I was always an audio learner and a visual learner. If I could watch something or draw out the biochem pathways, for example, the Krebs cycle, if I drew that out, I could learn it. If I drew out all my amino acids enough, I would learn them. If I solved enough physics Newtonian mechanics problem, I understood the Newton's third law. I could apply and recognize it in various scenarios. And that's great for building content. But content is only one small piece. It's only the foundation of a great MCAT score. You need solid strategies. You need good thinking skills. You need proven methods that are going to allow you to move through the exam in the time you want, that you're going to get rewarded for. Okay? So that's what Next Step's here for. So your next step, no pun intended, would be after you've got a solid base of content, get some reliable strategy books. Books that aren't going to just take you through science, but take you through, okay, how's the MCAT going to go about testing this science? That's the true difficulty of the MCAT. Not in what it's testing, but how it's testing that material. Another question I get a lot from my students, and maybe you're thinking this right now, is, well, sure, Anthony, but how many tests should I be taking? What am I looking for? Okay. So, as with all things, the more familiarity you have with something, the more comfortable you are. Remember that poll we gave you guys? And we said, what are you most afraid of, or what concerns you the most about the MCAT? Only 6% said biological sciences and biochemistry. 35% said physics and gen chem. Well, Why is that? The MCAT tests those sciences in the same way, with the same creative passages. The same critical reading and thinking skills are being tested. But the reason so few of you were worried so much about bio and biochem is because you're just familiar with it. Familiarity breeds confidence. Confidence means not panicking when you see that material presented in an unfamiliar way. And that's what MCAT practice is all about. The more familiar you get with how the MCAT tests material, the more times you go through or work with a tutor to go through MCAT-like thinking, MCAT-like problems, the more and more predictable you see the MCAT really is. The more and more standardized you see it really is. That it's not some crazy, intelligent exam. No, it's a very lazy, very predictable, very beatable exam. Does not mean that it's easy. I'm not going to lie to you guys and say the MCAT's a breeze. No, but it is beatable because it is so very predictable. That is one of its greatest strengths. That is also one of its greatest weaknesses. So your goal, by the time you walk into your MCAT for the real deal, whether it's April, May, June, July, or 2016, you want to have 6 to 8 full-length exams under your belt so that you can walk in and say, I've done this thousands of times before. I have taken thousands of practice problems. And you walk in that day thinking, you know what? Nothing's new. I've got the skills. I've got the methods. I've got the strategies. All that happens today is I happen to be doing it in a new place. That kind of confidence isn't going to come easy. It's not going to happen overnight. Another obstacle to that is that the AAMC only has released one practice exam. The current MCAT has 8 official practice exams released, along with hundreds of other practice problems. That ain't true here. We've only got one official exam and one quasi-half exam. Okay? So you are going to need to buy additional materials. And again, next step, we've spent the better part of the last year designing 5 full links based on exactly what the AAMC is testing and the exact breakdowns they describe for you in the official guide or in the breakdowns we go into in our AAMC review videos. Okay? So you can get additional tests. They're out there. Okay? But you want to make sure you're getting material that is based on the new MCAT because there's lots of material still based on the old MCAT. It's not going to help you for the most part in terms of strategy. Content's okay, but even that is changing a little bit. There's a lot less orgo, a lot less physics than there used to be. And there's bio and biochem that was never on the MCAT before. And there's psych and soc that was never on the MCAT before. Another question you may be asking yourself is how many times should you take the MCAT? Right? Now, one of the things I saw with my students, because I took the MCAT so many years ago, back in 05, before I started med school, when it was still on paper. It was one of the last years it was on paper. It was only offered twice a year. So students knew you got to do the MCAT right, you got to do it once. Otherwise, you're going to have to wait 6 months. Now the MCAT's on computer. It's offered dozens of times a year. But still, plan to take the MCAT once, plan to do it right. It's not the end of the world if you have to take it more than once, but please shoot for once. Do it once, do it right. Do not do what I've seen hundreds of students do before. Oh, I'll just go take it and not really care about it just to practice. You don't want to use an official score as a practice test because that will be reported to med schools. They will see every single score you ever take. And it depends on the med school what they'll do with those scores. Some schools will only take the most recent. Some schools will take your highest score no matter what it was. Some schools will cherry pick and take the highest section you ever got. Oh, so the first time you got your MCAT, you maximize your cars and physics score. The second time you got your MCAT, you maximize your biochem, and psychology, sociology score. But most schools will just take an average. So if you don't do that well the first time, that means the onus is on you to do that much better the second time, because now you're going to report to them an average score, not your best. And also, the AAMC limits how many times you can take the MCAT. They're not just going to let you take it unlimited times, because they know familiarity breeds success. Okay, so plan to do it once, plan to do it right with this new MCAT. It also looks better for admissions, because when it comes down to it, if I've got one student who scores a 510 and they've taken the MCAT twice, and I've got another student who scored a 510 and they've only taken the MCAT once, if all other things are equal, why wouldn't they go with the student who did it once and did it right? Okay? Now, if you do plan on retaking it. Remember, the onus is on you if you retake the exam to do that much better. You don't just want to do a little bit better. You need to improve significantly for that second score to mean anything, which is why you have to be really careful to make sure you're not taking the MCAT until you're ready, until you're getting the score you want. And that means taking lots of practice exams, having a tutor to work with that can tell you, yep, it looks like you're ready to get the score you need. Because as many as 30% of test takers will actually see a drop in their second MCAT score, and another additional 10 to 20% see no change or negligible change the second time at the MCAT. Okay? The reason for that is because, well, a lot of times, there was nothing majorly wrong. So unless you can point to some specific issue that happened on test day, unless you can point to some specific problem that happened on test day, you should plan on taking the MCAT once. All right? Only if something crazy happened. You didn't study the right books, something happened that day, you got the flu, you got sick, the power went out. There's no reason to avoid your score. There's no reason to plan to retake the exam because the odds are you're not likely to improve significantly. So ideally, you should be spending 3 to 4 months prepping for the MCAT. That's what your ideal shot would be. Prepping for the MCAT, about 3 to 4 months. That's if you're full-time. If it's part-time, you're looking at 5 to 6 months. Okay? Now, ideally, take the MCAT spring before you plan to start med school, okay, the calendar year. So if you're looking to start med school 2016, which is the current, this summer's application process, you're going to be taking the MCAT in spring 2015. Okay? That's when you're looking to take the MCAT, maybe June at the latest. So your application is complete by August at the latest. Okay? That's your goal. Now, we cannot register for the MCAT. There is no avoiding that. It is incumbent upon you to register for the MCAT, choose an area that's close enough for you, convenient for you, to take the MCAT. Right? Now, the MCAT itself costs a significant amount of money. You're looking at $300 to register for the MCAT. Okay? You're looking at another $160 to register for the MCAS. That's the centralized application used to apply to med schools. And then if you register late, it's an extra $50. If you decide to change where your testing is because maybe you've moved or something happened, it's another $125. Now for April 2015, the AAMC is offering a $150 Amazon gift card for those who register to take the MCAT in April 2015. Because again, they're trying to get people to take the new MCAT because everybody was rushing to take the old MCAT and they literally ran out of seats months ago. So you can actually get $150 back if you're planning to take the MCAT in April. So you're cutting your costs in half for the exam itself. So remember, nobody can do that for you. You must register for the exam. So go to that URL when the registration opens in the new year and start reserving your seat. Okay. Okay. Now we're going to bring a poll for you guys about how to do this. So let's bring up this poll. And if you take a look, we want to know, how do you plan on prepping for the MCAT? What do you guys plan on doing? Are you looking for a course? Are you looking for one-on-one tutoring? Are you looking for self-directed study? Let us know.
All right, again, this is a great group. We're at just about 70%. Can we get a few more votes here? You must have given some thought to how you're going to prep. Maybe share it with us, okay? All right. At 80%, I'm going to count to 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 85% voted, and here are the results.
All right, so let's take a look, guys. Great. So we got a little over half of you are looking for self-study. Okay. All right. If you know you're disciplined, you know you're all set. Great. Self-study can be a great way to go. As long as you've got the proper materials, self-directed study can be a way to achieve success in the MCAT. About 9% of you are looking for a big classroom course. All right. There are pros and cons to each we'll look at later. One-on-one tutoring. About 1/5 of you are looking for that. So Next Step provides a little bit of both. So we provide self-study. We have strategy books, the content books if you guys want to do directed study. We offer you guys strategies. Or if you want to work with a tutor one-on-one, get that personalized attention of walking you through your own strengths and weaknesses, we offer that as well. Okay? Classroom courses are another way to go. If you like the structure, the familiarity of a classroom course, you can certainly go that route. There are plenty of ways to do that. If you're just not sure yet, take a few moments to think about, all right, how did you learn best in undergrad? How did you prepare for exams? What kind of methods work best for you? But no matter what, a typical 3-month study plan looks like what we're going to show you right now. So thanks for polling in. Okay? But no matter what, whether it's self-directed, class, or one-on-one tutoring, you guys need to have a clear study plan, a clear study calendar. It all goes back to that key organizational skill you need. So let's take a look at what now, if you work with a tutor or you work with a course, you're going to develop a plan. You know, your tutor will work out a specific plan for you, or the classroom will have a specific syllabus to follow. But no matter what, you know, in the early month or month 1 of a typical 3-month, 90-day schedule, your focus should be on content. You're getting all the AAMC materials, all the content materials, and you're looking to get through all that content, you know, as much of it as you can in the first month. And you're slowly spending maybe 20% of your time doing practice problems, you know, because you're focused mainly on building that content foundation. Then, as you get to the second month, you're going to start to transition. You're going to be wrapping up your content review, and you're going to be spending more and more of your study time doing practice problems, working on strategy, learning from the mistakes you make, and less time just reading science. Okay? And then in the final month, you're going to be pretty much solely focused on taking practice tests, taking a full length and then reviewing it, taking an exam and then reviewing it, revisiting old exams to see, have you improved, have you got any better, and any other AAMC materials you have, you're going to make sure you go through them by the time you reach the end of your prep. Because again, that's the most valuable material you've got, what literally comes straight from the horse's mouth, the AAMC. Now, what strategies are proven to work? Because we don't want you guys to come away with just, you know, ideas and promises. These are 10 proven strategies that Next Step and myself have developed that have worked for thousands of students on the MCAT. You know, because the MCAT is difficult, but it's just like any other standardized test. It is susceptible to certain strategies. So number 1, there is no one magic bullet where one strategy is going to work for everybody on every section. You need to find what strategy works best for you. So at Next Step, we've got several strategies we recommend to students to have them try out. In terms of reading passages, some people prefer to read a passage and keep track of information by note-taking, and that's fine. You'll have scratch paper available on test day. Some students prefer to highlight the passage to keep track of information, and that's great because the AAMC will be retaining the highlighting option on the new MCAT. Some students prefer just to skim. They pretty much just skim and only read certain sections, certain sentences, certain portions of the material, and that works best for them for keeping track of where information is. And we will go through each of these strategies, their pros, their cons, because they all work. It all depends on how you learn and what works best for you in our strategy and practice books. We will take you through each of them. You also need to remember, number 5, that when you're learning science for the MCAT, there's the rule of 2s. You first need to understand the concept. Then you need to master how the MCAT tests that concept. What are the likely creative ways they're going to present it to you? And that dovetails nicely into number 6. When it comes to equations, don't just memorize equations. You need to understand how those equations work. Because it's very, very unlikely that the MCAT's going to ask you, hey, please plug and chug through this equation. Just like it's very unlikely 5 years from now, when you guys are physicians, that your doctor's going to say, hey, you know what? Oh, your physicians, your patients are going to come up to you and say, this is exactly what's wrong with me. Here are my symptoms. Here's how I would describe them. They don't have that medical knowledge. You do. You're going to have to understand the body so well. When the students or when the patient's randomly going on and on about some, you know, pain or some issues that they're not really describing accurately, you can read in between the lines of what they're saying, identify the important parts of their symptoms, and figure out what's wrong with them, figure out how to address it. Now, you're going to use your time effectively. If you know that a passage or a question isn't worth doing, you're going to skip it. No one said you have to do the question in order or the entire exam in order. Within a section, do your fastest, most easiest questions first, the easiest passages first. Record your mistakes. We'll talk about a lessons learned journal if you become a Next Step student, a way to keep track of your wrong answers and what mistakes you make. Diagnose your own symptoms. Study groups. Form them early, form them often. One of the best ways to tell if you know something, especially if you're studying on your own, is can you explain it to someone else and have them understand it? Then you know you've mastered something. And finally, number 10, literally minimizing the variables. knowing what to expect on test day, removing the veneer of secrecy and intimidation the MCAT tries to hide behind by remembering it's a standardized, practiced exam. Very predictable. They're not allowed to surprise you. Right? So you have several for preparing on test day. Lots of options you can see here. Now, there are pros and cons to each. Self-study, very, very efficiently priced. But the problem is a lot of times you won't know what you don't know, or you're not sure what resources are best, or you can only come up with what you can come up with. You only have strategy you can come up with. A lot of students tend to see score plateaus. Okay? You can also go for a prep course as well. So prep courses are comprehensive. They have nice, strict schedules to keep you on pace, and they have solid materials. But again, if you get into a large class, you run the risk of they just hand out strategies and say, here, this is what we have, and if it doesn't work for you, sorry, that's all we got. Or they spend a lot of time based on what they think is important, because on average, this is a topic that all students, or the average student, has trouble with, but maybe not you. They also tend to be very expensive. And you can go with tutoring as well, which is, in addition to providing materials, where Next Step excels. So on the one hand, you get customized service. Everything's completely tailored to identify your strengths and weaknesses, the best strategies that work for you, and they will work with you until you get them. But it does cost more than self-study. But it's very comparatively priced and not as expensive as a lot of the classroom options. But no matter what, it's up to you. You need to decide and make those decisions. How are you going to prepare for this very difficult but very worthwhile exam? So I want to thank you guys for listening. We've left a few minutes open for questions and answers. I want to thank Linda again at accepted.com for allowing us to speak with you today. So go ahead, let us know what questions you have, and we'll answer a few of them in the next few minutes. Okay. In the meantime, go ahead, look us up on Facebook. If you'd like to contact us, reach out to us as well. I check that email pretty much every day. So Linda, if you'd like to take us through some questions.
Sure. We do have some questions here from this wonderful audience. And obviously, if you folks have questions, you have Anthony's email address up there, as well as their Twitter account and Facebook page, so you have access if we don't get to your question today. First question is from Daniel. He asks, how long is your MCAT acceptable for medical schools after you have taken the MCAT? How long is this?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
Yep. Most MCAT scores expire after 3 years. Schools won't consider them viable after 3 years. The AAMC has said they're going to stick to that. As far as they know, all right, they're going to stick to that. All right? That may change as the scores come out, but generally MCAT scores are good for 3 years. They'll still be reported to med schools, but med schools won't consider them valid for about 3 years.
Okay. Jonathan asks, what resources for the current MCAT are still good to use for the 2015 MCAT? Is it the physical sciences, the verbal reasoning, biological sciences? Would the official AAMC guide and self-assessment questions be useful still for those areas? Which I also think is a great question.
Okay. Yes, I agree. Excellent question, Jonathan. Thank you. So that is the material. How much of your material will translate to the new MCAT? Well, for biology, any materials you have for biology, they're still applicable because that biology is not going anywhere. They're just adding more to it, going in more depth. So the biology books will largely translate. The Gen Chem books, the Gen Chem content you have will largely translate. Verbal practice you have will again largely translate because the CAR section is just a longer, souped-up version of the verbal reasoning section. But the biochem, there aren't really many biochem resources because the old MCAT didn't have biochem. Physics, there's less physics than there was on the old MCAT. Not much, but a little bit less. And orgo, there's a lot less orgo. The new MCAT is less than 5% orgo overall. So a lot of the orgo you took in undergrad that used to be on the old MCAT will no longer be tested. So the orgo, the physics, less of that will transfer over. And the psych and soc is all new. But if you want an official guide, you want to use the new official guide for the MCAT. They released that back, in August, July. But you want the newest, latest official guide to the new MCAT. They'll break down all the topics. And we do as well in our AAMC review videos.
Okay, great. Now we have several people asking if the slides from today's webinar are going to be available and if the recording of today's webinar will be available. The webinar has been recorded and it should be posted on Accepted probably in about a week. And Anthony, are you going to make the slides available or
yes, if students would like to email us, and also what we're going to do is we're going to provide a link to download them on the website. You can email me directly if you'd like to get the slides, and we're also going to be working on posting them to the Next Step website.
Okay.
Right? So we'll get that up. So you can come to our website, take a look at these slides, and follow along with the video if you like.
You know, maybe Anthony, if you could send us a link with the, or send us the slides, and we can keep them on the same page where we keep the webinar itself. I don't know. You and I can discuss that.
Yep.
You can discuss that afterwards. You and I can discuss that.
Not a problem.
But,
sure. As soon as it's up, I'll let you guys know.
Yeah, the video will be up there. Okay. Let's see. Quentin asks, how many hours do you suggest students study each day? Do you have a rule of thumb? Yeah, do you have a rule of thumb for that?
The short answer is there is no magic number. There really isn't. Now, for the current MCAT, the AAMC recommends about 350 hours of prep, beginning to end. Spread it out however you like. They recommend 350 hours. With the new MCAT, with the additional materials, you're looking at probably 450 to 500 hours of prep on average, around 400, 450. Now, as far as hours per day, it really depends on where you're currently starting, where you're looking to score. But I can tell you, based on my experience, if you can treat the MCAT like a full-time job, devote maybe 8 hours a day, not 8 hours in a row, but 8 hours a day, roughly 40 hours a week, that's a good 3-month schedule. If you can't, realistically, you're looking at about minimum 20 hours a week of devoted MCAT prep over 3 months to have a reasonable expectation of doing well.
Okay, this is going to be our last question from Dylan. What non-AAMC study materials for the 2015 MCAT, the new MCAT, do you recommend?
Great question. So right now, there are very, very few materials. Okay, so Kaplan has come up with some books. So Kaplan's got a few content books that you can grab. I think they have a 7-book set, so that's a pretty good start as well. We'll also be rolling out our content books, but for the most part, content's content. So Kaplan's pretty much a solid start. The more important thing would be strategy, but I would definitely recommend if you can pick it up. If you need something to start with right away, the Kaplan books are a great content source, and you can get them without having to be an actual student in their classes.
Right,
and then the strategy books, right now, as far as I know, only Next Step and Kaplan really have released dedicated strategy books to the new MCAT. Exam Crackers hasn't really released any brand new material yet, not much. So I would say Kaplan's your best bet as far as content.
And George is asking, how much are your test prep books? I know I had said the other question was the last one, but it so fits with what you're discussing.
Okay. If you go to Amazon right now, the books are around, with Amazon discounts, you're looking at about $30, $33 a book. And because we want to keep them inexpensive, we want to make them accessible, because the goal is to get as many people prepared for the MCAT as possible. So you don't just want some incredibly expensive resource, because expensive doesn't necessarily mean good. You want something that's usable, works for you. So go check them out, read the reviews, but you're looking at about 30. I would expect if somebody's asking you to pay more than $50 for a book, I would consider walking away.
Okay, great. All right, with that, Anthony, I want to thank you for this great webinar, great introduction to MCAT 2015. I also want to thank our audience who's been with us for the webinar. You've been wonderful. Your questions, your answers, your participation has been very much appreciated. And I want to let you know, Anthony, that thank yous are now coming in via the question window. Riha, you're very much welcome. Esther, Quinton, again, you're all very, very welcome. Appreciate your being here. And just so you know, accepted, while we do nothing in terms of test prep, we can help you tremendously once you have your MCAT score with your MCAS application, with your COMAS application, with secondary essays and applications, basically with everything that comes after the MCAT. I also want to just echo very quickly what Anthony said about the importance of taking the exam one time, taking the exam early, and really, budgeting the time, preparing for it well, and having it behind you when you actually get into the application cycle, which basically opens in early June. As you leave, please take a minute to complete our short survey. We really do value your feedback. And again, you're welcome to those people who are thanking us. You can review this webinar probably next week, early next week online. We will send out an email letting you know when it's available. And by then, Anthony and I will have figured out where the slides are going to be available too. Thank you again, and best of luck with your MCAT and your medical school applications.
Have a great night, everybody.